The old man at the pub warned us. He said, "Don't go into Epping Forest after dark." His eyes were wide and his voice was serious. He told us stories about the ghosts of highwaymen and lost children who haunt the ancient woods. He said the trees themselves watch you, and the paths move when you're not looking. But we were young, and we thought we were brave. We laughed at his warnings. We thought it was just a bit of local folklore, something to scare the tourists. So that night, under a sliver of a moon, my friends Carl, Sarah, and I decided to see for ourselves. We parked the car near the edge of the woods and stepped out into the cold night air. The dare was a simple walk to the ancient Queen Elizabeth's hunting lodge and back. It sounded easy enough. Our torches cut sharp beams through the darkness, but the light didn't seem to travel very far. It was as if the night itself was swallowing it whole. The entrance to the forest was a wall of blackness, a gaping mouth ready to devour us. A sudden wind rustled the leaves above, sounding like 100 whispers all at once. For a moment we just stood there, the pubman's words echoing in our minds. Sarah nervously joked, "Well, no turning back now," but her voice trembled a little. I felt a knot of unease tighten in my stomach. This already felt different from any other night walk. It felt like we were crossing a line, stepping into a place where we didn't belong. The air was heavy, charged with something I couldn't name. We took our first steps onto the muddy path, and the sounds of the nearby road vanished instantly. It was as if a thick, soundproof blanket had been dropped around us. The silence was the most unnerving part. There were no owls hooting, no small animals scurrying in the undergrowth. It was a dead, unnatural quiet that pressed in on our ears. I remember looking at Carl, his face pale in the torchlight, and he gave me a weak smile that didn't reach his eyes. We were trying so hard to be brave, to pretend this was just a bit of fun. But deep down, I think we all knew we had made a terrible mistake. The forest felt ancient, powerful, and it didn't want us here. Every snap of a twig under our boots sounded like a gunshot in the oppressive silence. We walked in a tight group, our shoulders almost touching, as if that could protect us from whatever was lurking just beyond the reach of our lights. The trees were huge and gnarled, their branches twisting together overhead like skeletal fingers blocking out the faint starlight. I kept turning around, convinced I could hear footsteps behind us, but there was never anyone there. It was just the echo of our own fear, I told myself. But the feeling of being watched was impossible to shake. It was a physical sensation, a prickling on the back of my neck that made me want to run. The deeper we went, the colder it became. The drop in temperature was sudden and unnatural. One moment the air was just chilly, the next it was icy, and I could see my own breath misting in front of my face. Sarah pulled her jacket tighter around her, her teeth chattering. "Did you feel that?" she whispered, her voice barely audible. We all nodded. It felt like we had walked through an invisible, frozen wall. The path we were following seemed to grow narrower, the trees closing in on us from both sides. Their dark trunks looked like silent figures standing in the shadows, their branches like long, reaching arms. It was a terrifying living maze. I kept my torch beam fixed on the ground ahead, trying to focus on just putting one foot in front of the other. But my eyes kept darting into the darkness on either side. I thought I saw movement in the periphery of my vision, a flicker of white, a shadow that seemed to detach itself from a tree and then melt back into it. When I turned my head to look properly, there was nothing there. "Stop it," I muttered to myself. "It's just your imagination." But then Carl stopped dead. "Did you see that?" he asked, his voice shaking. He pointed his torch towards a thicket of bushes. I swear I saw someone duck behind there. We all froze, aiming our lights at the spot, but there was only stillness and silence. The sense of being watched intensified until it was almost unbearable. It felt like dozens of eyes were on us from every direction, hidden in the impenetrable blackness between the trees. We started walking faster, our brave adventure forgotten. Now, all we wanted was to get out. The forest, however, seemed to have other plans. The path began to twist and turn in ways I didn't remember. Every direction looked the same. The familiar landmarks we had noted on our way in were gone. It was like the forest was changing around us, rearranging itself to keep us trapped within its ancient heart. Panic began to set in, cold and sharp. We were lost. It was a simple, terrifying fact. We had been walking for what felt like hours, but we seemed to be getting no closer to the edge of the woods. In fact, we couldn't even hear the distant hum of traffic anymore. There was only the sound of our own ragged breathing and the thumping of our hearts. Sarah started to cry softly, and Carl tried to comfort her, but his own face was a mask of fear. We huddled together, our 3 torch beams cutting pathetic circles in the overwhelming darkness. The woods were no longer just a collection of trees. They felt like a single, thinking entity, and it was playing a cruel game with us. We were nothing but mice in its trap. Just when we thought things couldn't get any worse, we heard it. It started as a faint sound, carried on the cold wind. At first, I thought it was an animal, maybe a fox, but then it grew louder, and we realized with a jolt of pure terror what it was. It was the sound of a child laughing. It wasn't happy, playful laughter. It was cold and mocking, and it seemed to come from all around us at once. We spun around, our torch beams slicing wildly through the night, searching for the source. But there was no one. There was nothing but the dark, silent trees. The laughter echoed through the woods, bouncing from trunk to trunk until it felt like it was inside our own heads. Sarah screamed, a raw, piercing sound of absolute fear. The laughter stopped abruptly, plunging us back into that awful, heavy silence. The only sound now was Sarah's panicked sobbing. Carl grabbed her arm. "We have to go, now!" he yelled, his voice cracking. We broke into a clumsy run, stumbling over roots and crashing through unseen branches. We didn't know where we were going, we just ran. We ran from the laughter, from the cold, from the feeling of being watched. But the forest seemed to fight us at every step. Thorns snagged our clothes, and low-hanging branches slapped our faces. The ground became uneven and treacherous. As we ran, I risked a glance over my shoulder. For a split second, in the frantic waving of my torchlight, I saw it. A small, shadowy figure was standing by a huge oak tree not 20 feet away. It was no bigger than a child, but it was indistinct, like a smudge of darkness. I couldn't make out any features, but I knew, with a certainty that chilled me to the bone, that it was watching us. I screamed and pushed myself to run faster, not daring to look back again. I didn't tell Carl or Sarah what I saw. They were already terrified enough. I just kept shouting, "Keep going, don't stop!" The image of that small, dark shape was burned into my mind. The air grew even colder, and a strange, thick fog began to rise from the damp ground. It swirled around our ankles, then our knees, getting denser with every second. Soon we could barely see a few feet in front of us. Our torch beams were useless, reflecting off the thick white mist and creating a disorienting, luminous wall. We were running blind, lost in a cold, white nothingness. The laughter started again, closer this time, right by my ear. It was a girl's voice, whispering and giggling. I felt an icy touch on my neck. That was it. I couldn't take any more. I stopped, paralyzed by fear, unable to scream or move, convinced our end had come in that haunted, misty wood. Suddenly, Carl grabbed my hand and pulled me forward. "Don't stop!" he shouted, his voice hoarse with panic. "We have to keep moving!" His grip was like a lifeline, snapping me out of my frozen terror. We held onto each other, a terrified human chain, and pushed our way through the fog. We had no idea if we were going in the right direction, but stopping felt like surrender. We just kept moving, one step at a time, calling out to each other to make sure we stayed together. The whispers and giggles followed us, sometimes sounding far away, sometimes feeling like they were breathing right on our necks. The forest had become our own personal hell, a nightmare we couldn't wake up from. It felt like an eternity, but slowly, ever so slowly, we noticed a change. The oppressive darkness began to soften. A faint grey light started to filter through the canopy of leaves above. The fog began to thin, and we could see the shapes of the trees again. Dawn was breaking. The ghostly sounds faded with the darkness, replaced by the first hesitant chirps of birdsong. It was the most beautiful sound I have ever heard. With the light came hope. We could see a wider, more established path just a short distance away. With our last reserves of energy, we staggered towards it, collapsing onto the muddy track as the first rays of sun broke through the trees. We had survived. We half walked, half ran the rest of the way out of the forest, not looking back once. When we finally reached the car, we scrambled inside and locked the doors, panting and shaking. We didn't speak a word on the drive home. We were exhausted, scratched, and utterly terrified. The night had taken something from us. The world didn't seem as safe as it had before. We knew we had come face to face with something ancient and malevolent, something that defied all logical explanation. The experience bonded us, but it also left a scar on our souls. The memory of that laughter still haunts my dreams. A few days later, Carl called me. His voice was strange, quiet. "You need to hear this," he said. He explained that his phone had accidentally started recording audio at some point when we were running through the woods. He played it for me over the phone. I heard our panicked breathing, our frantic shouts, and the snapping of twigs. And then, underneath it all, there was another sound. It was a clear, soft whisper, a voice that hadn't been there with us. It said just one word, a name over and over again. It was Sarah's name. Sarah told us later she'd been having nightmares ever since that night, waking up feeling like someone was in the room with her. Something from Epping Forest had followed us out.